Our job is to talk about I Dwell in Possibility, poem number 466, and we'll do it by collaborating together on a collective close reading. So, Max, when we get to the word dwell, it's all yours to start us off on it. Molly, possibility, good luck with that one. Anna, I want you to handle the ratio that's implicit in the house and prose, P-R-O-S-E, house, prose, etc. Amaris, are there a lot of windows in your family house at home?
Yes.
A lot of windows.
Yes, there are
Okay,
a lot.
so I want you to take numerous for windows, numerous of windows, and Emily, help her out with the doors and the chambers, right? Allie, you and I are together going to do the everlasting roof. And Dave, you've got the visitors. And Max, you'll have fairest. We're going to have to make quick work of all this. All of us are going to do occupation. And Molly, you have the word this, which is the most important word, not only in Dickinson, but maybe in the English language. And we'll all do the spreading wide our narrow hands at the end. Okay, here we go. Max, you have dwell?
To dwell is to live in, but
Yeah.
we also associate dwelling with dwelling on something, to think on something.
Obsess.
Over and over, to
Can't get it out of your mind. Dwell. It's a slightly negative word when you're dwelling on that test that's coming up next week.
Absolutely.
What was the first one? Reside.
To live in, yeah.
Yeah.
Dwelling seems like a more official word for a house or somewhere where you live.
Great. Molly, she says, or the speaker I says, that she dwells in possibility, capital P. First of all, why capitalized?
Because it's important.
Right. We don't do that in English, though, do we? In American English of the 21st century. Did they do it typically in Dickinson's time in the 19th century, is your historical guess?
They were already done with that.
They were done with it.
Dickinson's time.
It's an 18th century thing, and prior, spelling, capitalization, Germans still capitalize nouns. So she's doing it for emphasis. All right, but now tell us about the word.
I think in the singular sense, as it's written here, it's sort of like a set of unlimited options.
If I came to you and said something is possible, what would I mean?
That it could happen.
That it could happen, good, as opposed to,
As opposed to not being a possibility. which
Okay.
means it couldn't happen.
what about probability?
Well, probability means it's likely to happen.
Okay, which is this? Possibility is sometimes, like it's possible to put people on Mars, but not likely. And we think of that as a possibility when a presidential candidate says, it's possible, meaning I'd like to do it, but it's kind of a long shot. But if my horse is, a sure shot winner, and I bet on that, it's more like probability. Which do you think this is?
This connotation seems much more sort of open and much more positive. So I think
She dwells there.
she dwells there.
Except if she's dwelling as in worrying about a test, in which case she's obsessed with possibility. It might not be good. Who knows with Emily Dickinson? But we'll come back to that. Thank you, Anna. You have the house, a fairer house. Why create a metaphor of a house for where she lives in possibility?
Well, it's interesting because it seems like there's a divide if there's a house of prose and a house of possibility.
Yeah.
That there are two separate entities here.
So she's making a comparison using the word fairer. Who's got fairest later in this poem? Max again? How did that happen? We have fairer house and visitors are the fairest. Just define fair really quickly.
Equal, just, but also
Equal, just. Whoa, just as in justice. Fair. Like, you're being unfair to me. No, I'm trying to be fair.
Or
Okay.
pretty.
Pretty, of course. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Who's the fairest of them all? The visitor. Okay, so it's a fairer house. So it's a house of justice. It's a just house. But I'm not so sure that the Dickinsonian elitism, sorry for that word so early in our discussions about Dickinson, isn't at play here to some degree. She's prideful about this house. This is what kind of house? Fairer house? A prettier house?
Well, I mean, if you jump down, it's a superior house.
A house with a lot of windows, Amaris. Less expensive or more expensive?
More expensive?
Why? Probably don't know.
No. Well, glass was more expensive during the period.
Dave, you were going to say something?
It does have doors. It didn't have to, but it does.
Right, so this is let's just call it a fancy house, a worked up house, an architected house, a house of a dream design. Okay, so now let's get to this comparison. A fairer house than, not a fairer house than a garden apartment, not a fairer house than a split level, not a fairer house than a hovel, but a fairer house than Prose.
Which I guess means that she's saying that the house of possibility, that there are more possibilities in her house than there are in Prose.
So possibility is to what as what is to Prose. They're two, this is hard, right? Possibility,
It's a little exploration.
right.
I guess possibility is kind of.
Let's do the other
if we
side of the
equate-
ratio first.
Well, if we
Okay,
equate
what's the
possibility-
opposite of Prose in the ratio?
Possibility.
No. What's the opposite of prose?
Poetry.
Poetry, right? Or verse. I mean, when you see the word prose in Emily Dickinson, you think about it because this is the language here, the lineation, the dashes, the ambiguity, the capitalization. It's so poetic that when she says prose, she means something that's not what she's doing. Okay, so poetry is to prose as what is to what?
I guess possibility.
Is to,
House. Or
what's the opposite? Don't get stuck on one of her conceits. Possibility is to, poetry is to, okay, the floor is open. Anna says, poetry is to prose as possibility is to impossibility. What do you think?
Structure.
Limits.
Limits, restriction, Emily?
Established sort of things.
Conventions, linguistic conventions. Okay, so she's dwelling in possibility, and it's nicer than prose, and she's using the conceit of the house. Now she runs wild with the conceit, which is something Emily Dickinson does a lot. So, Amaris, you've already talked about this, but we'll be brief. Numerous of windows means.
Allowing multiple perspectives, viewpoints.
So you're really going with the conceit. So Emily really allows this extended conceit to just go crazy. So you keep thinking, okay, we can see in, more perspectives, more light. Keep going, anything else?
Yeah, I was going to say that it does imply a reciprocity of vision, but Emily seems to emphasize enclosure more, I think, and
Certainly
it's
with
sort of
doors and
visible.
chambers, yeah.
Right.
Okay, good. Superior for doors, who's got that? Emily, yeah.
Well, I guess superior in terms of like construction of building. It suggests that it has a physical quality that lends itself to doors.
What's analogous between lots of windows and expensive, hardcore doors? If you're guessing about the Dickinsonian personality, she's building a house. She wants lots of windows and good doors. Take a guess. There's no real answer to
Windows
this.
generally are meant for looking out, and doors are entrances.
Letting light in, and doors are entrances. So do we know anything about the Dickinsonian personality on the basis of just that? Allie, if you go to someone's house and you say, wow, they have a lot of windows, but the doors, I mean, there's triple locks,
Well, I think that kind of hints towards her reclusive personality.
you may be committing the biographical fallacy, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Well,
She wants to keep you out somewhat. This is not really a democratic poetry. In fact, it may be that prose is somehow, we're going to get to Whitman later. Maybe there's an implicit, which she wouldn't have been aware of Whitman probably at this time, but prose seems like they're going to have lots of doors. Everybody can come in. At this house, I'm not so sure everybody can come in. Chambers as the cedars, is that still Emily? Mm-hmm. What are chambers?
Chambers, I guess,
In the house.
rooms.
Rooms?
They also applies to anatomy in some weird ways. I couldn't quite understand the analogy as the cedars.
Let's stick with rooms first before we get to what the cedars suggests. Chambers, you're right, are rooms. There's a particular room that's probably right for the word choice of chamber.
Bed chambers.
Bedroom. Bedroom. Okay, but cedars throws us off. Okay, what's made of cedar? Probably you don't have cedar in this space in your house, but someone would have with a little extra money. Molly?
I was going to say a cedar chest or a cedar closet,
A closet. Why do we put cedar in closets?
because it keeps moths away.
Yes, it keeps moths away, so a fancy closet. This is really a fancy house. So it's possibly a closet, although Chambers suggests bedroom. It's possible that the bedroom is made of cedars, but cedar also suggests something else. Anybody know about trees? Not really a...
Thick forest, like a dense type of.
It's the end-stage growth tree of a certain part of the world, right? So there's oak in some parts of the world, hemlock. Cedar is one of those. Cedar is the tallest tree in a certain area, Lebanon, for instance. Okay, so we've got
Syntactically, it's really bizarre.
of Chambers as the cedars. So Chambers are probably not made of cedar, they're probably as tall as cedars.
As tall as cedars.
Right. And who's got impregnable of eye? We didn't do that one, but take a guess. Allie, impregnable of eye means?
It makes an impression.
I don't think so. Wow, there's a wrong answer. That's so
Impregnable
cool.
is something that you can't look through or
Yes.
get through.
Impregnable of eye, you cannot see inside these bedrooms. Now that's a little weird because as we're about to find out, there's no roof. So I suppose if you
But there's
climbed
a ton
up
of
to the
windows.
top and a ton of windows.
But
So
there's
this
also-
is like a Borgesian house, I think. This is really like Escher. I mean, that Dickinson is like Escher. Go ahead, Dave, what were you going to say?
Well, impregnable of eye echoes the doors that they're both exclusionary. And you could relate that to her elitism.
Say more.
Well, the impregnable of eye it keeps people out. The doors keep people out, but the doors have locks on them. I think what she's saying it has to do with her ability to let people in. There's a price of admission to
Are you
come inside.
feeling like you're being let into this poem? I know it's hard work and we're doing it together. Is this a poem that invites you in?
I think she's saying if you pay the cost of admission, you can come in.
What's the cost of admission?
Dwelling in possibility, using your imagination.
Well, I'm trying to understand this poem too. I mean,
We're doing a lot of work.
You have to do a lot of
A
work.
lot
to
of
get
work.
in.
So, it's, hello,
To climb up to
visitor, a reader here. Who are you? I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Can I come in?
Once you work
Give me
on it.
give me the code. What's the answer? And for an everlasting roof, so we have this conceit that's, and in most Dickinson poems, and others we'll talk about soon, she abandons a conceit when she starts it. But in this poem, she kind of sticks with it for a while. So we've got a fairer house than prose. The House of Poetry has a lot of windows, really good doors, very tall bedrooms that you can't see in. And now as for a roof, I love that. And for, now we go to the roof. What kind of roof? And for an everlasting roof, what? Who's got roof? Did we do that? Did I sign that? Allie?
Well, right after that, she says the sky. And so as opposed to a roof that could potentially collapse, which would be kind of if she followed the rest of the conceit of the architecture of poetry. This is an everlasting roof. It's an infinite. There's no limit.
When your family gets a roof on their house, or the apartment building you're renting gets a new roof, how many years does it last? I mean, this is something that people who bought roofs know, like me, but maybe you know.
I don't know, but I would hope
Typically?
a couple of centuries.
Oh, goodness gracious.
This is-
The American Roofer Union is going to love you.
Well, I think it's
you
different
can
in apartment
they'll tell you it's a 30-year roof and it's probably 10.
Okay.
You got to do a new roof. Unless you get a super roof, it's pretty bad. And I'm sorry that there are probably some roofers who are going to,
So she's just avoiding all of that
Be
by
mad
saying
at
that
me.
the roof is the sky.
This is an everlasting roof. And everlasting is good. It's not only guaranteed forever, unlike the roofer, but there is no roofer because in a way God is the roofer. In a way that the roof is the heavens. And that's everlasting. It's a good word to use for something heavenly. Everlasting roof. The gambrels of the sky. Now gambrels are those things that you would use it's an architect's word, a builder's word, to structure the thing that holds the roof together. Kind of like a lintel for roofs. Okay, so the gambrels of the sky. So there's a typical Dickinsonian way of dealing with the metaphor. Gambrels of the sky. Well, the sky doesn't have gambrels. The sky is held up by itself, by air, by life, by heaven. So the gambrels of the sky. Now, so we've done windows, we've done doors, we've done bedroom, we got the roof in place, and now who comes to the house? Visitors? Now, did I assign visitors to anybody? Well, Emily. Oh, Dave. I'm so sorry. Who are the visitors?
Well, I think it could be read two ways. I think it could be the visitors are the people who, like her, dwell in possibility, who are invited. But I want to read it as the visitors could be anybody who chooses to use their imagination. She's sort of inviting people, telling them what they need to do, but they still have
So
to do something.
she begins by saying, I live in possibility. It's a better house than prose. You're not reading prose here, you're reading poetry. So I live in possibility, and people who visit me in possibility are required, or it's, if you're going to get something out of it, you need to have,
An imagination.
you're saying imagination. You need to have the imagination to imagine being in a house in which the sky is
Limitless.
limitless. The sky's the limit in Dickinson, is what she's saying here, in a way. A visitor's the fairest. What kind of visitors? Max, the fairest?
The fairest, well, again, either the most equal, the most just, or the loveliest,
And only those.
and only
So
those.
she's pretty discriminating, and Dickinson, or the Dickinsonian subject, is pretty darn discriminating. She's not letting everybody in. When we get to Walt Whitman in this chapter, we're going to find someone who wants everyone to come in. This is a very big difference between the two. And it's not coincidental, given this poem, that Dickinson writes in verse that is very verse-like. It's got intense use of verse tools and strategies, from the ambiguity, from the stress by capitalization, from the dash, which we're going to talk about in a second. And Whitman, who writes a verse, very much a verse, and a verse that's been very influential, can be said to be writing a prose-like verse. She's not opposing herself specifically to Whitman, but she's setting up an aesthetic, a pre-modern aesthetic, a proto-modern aesthetic that's very different from the Whitmanian aesthetic. So it's helpful for us to see the two. So a visitor's the fairest. For Whitman, it's going to be a visitor's the commonest, the cheapest, the easiest. For her, the fairest, only those who are fair. So you knock on the door, who is it? I'm fair, I'm beautiful, I'm just, I'm something. Whatever it is that's extreme. Okay, so those are the visitors, not all of us, but we, because we've been working hard, I suppose. Now, for occupation, did I assign the word occupation?
All of us.
All of us. Okay, Molly, this is going to be work.
So occupation can also mean living, like dwelling, but there's something.
Well, there's pause there now. Don't run over your best point, right? Occupation refers to dwell. I reside here. Dear occupant. Whoever dwells there is the occupant. So for occupation, she takes occupying and makes it a noun. Okay, go ahead. What's the next connotation?
I was going to say there's something more permanent about occupation than dwelling.
In the connotation of it? Okay. Anna, another connotation of occupation?
That can also mean your life's work, your job.
Your job. What's your occupation? I think on census forms, they don't say what's your job, they say what's your occupation. Occupation, teacher. Occupation, plumber. Occupation, roofer. Don't want you if you're a roofer. For occupation, what I do. And now, how many of you work at home? Well, you guys are students for the most part, but if you work at home, I mean, Emily telecommuted, basically, between herself and her poems, which she put in her drawer, and occasionally publication, but her work was done at home. Her work was done in the House of Possibility. The poem that you're reading is one of those things that she did as the result of her occupation. We're going to find Laureen Niedecker a little later in this course talk about how her job is to do this. So for occupation, for job, there's a third sense of occupation that's probably not appropriate, but in this part of our lives, in this part of the century, is a very important word. Dave Poplar?
I was thinking of Occupy Wall Street, but I don't think that's what you had in mind.
But occupation can mean what one army does to a nation, or what one nation that's aggressive and imperialistic does to it. So if you are occupied, it means that people are essentially in your house. Like soldiers in the South during the Civil War would have occupied a house and then eaten everything out and so forth. I'm sure she would not, given the dwelling of possibility, appreciate it that much. Possibly it's a modern interpretation of a poem that didn't mean it, but it's worth thinking about that. Okay, so the word this. I said the most important word in the English language, and did I say we would all do that?
No, that's me.
Molly?
But we should all help.
Okay.
To me, this is the poem. It's the poem itself. It's kind of a meta statement almost.
It's a meta statement. Okay, so the dash after this can do two things. If the dash weren't a dash but a colon, what would your answer be?
This would be the spreading wide. of
Yes, this would be whatever follows. The spreading wide. So her occupation would be the spreading wide of her narrow hands to gather paradise. It's kind of a holy notion of the poet in the house. It may be that, but it's not a colon, it's a dash. So you read it as if almost it was a period. And the spreading wide is almost a fragment coming afterwards, or a semicolon maybe. And if you read it that way, go ahead with your reading. You started it. The self-reference.
That was
For
all
occupation,
really had.
this.
This is the poem.
This is this, 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 this. When I say this, it's one of those indicative words. It's vague because if I don't point, if I don't use the indicative, the specific indicative, this could be general. This, this, this. But this is a cup with a Kelly Writer's House on it. This. Okay, for occupation, this refers, because it's a printed word, this, in Emily it would have been a written word with a dash. This refers to this. This what, though? This poem? Keep going.
But also like
Riff
the
on
action
this.
of writing the poem.
The action of writing the poem. This. What are you doing, Al? I'm doing this. I just wrote the word this. This. What are you doing? I'm writing. I'm actually making myself. I'm creating a subject. I'm creating a self. I'm doing this. I'm figuring out who I am. I'm figuring out what my relationship to the world is. I'm figuring out what writing means to me and how it creates a subject that distinguishes itself from everybody else, which is the opposite of what Walt Whitman wanted to do. He wanted to create a self that was selfless. Strong but selfless. Aggressive but selfless. Emily is creating a self that's self-full. Okay, so for occupation, this writing, this poem, anything else? This
dwelling in possibility, like.
This, for occupation, is my job is to dwell in possibility, and maybe there's one more. This? What else is this?
The process.
The process of what?
Of reading?
Of reading? What are we doing?
We're dwelling in possibility. We read the
By doing the work of trying to understand this impossible possibility, this difficult poem, this difficult writing, this difficult music, as Laurie Anderson would say. For occupation, this, the work we're doing, the work we've done in 20 minutes is work. It takes 14 seconds to read prose like this, newspaper prose, not memorable. I've been dealing with this poem for 30 years, and I still do the work, and that's what my job is, and that's what our job is. Pretty cool. Final thought, Max? Any final thought?
It's a good occupation.
It's a good occupation. Would you like to do this? I
Sure.
know you
That's what we're
would.
doing
I know
now.
you would. Yes, but I mean, for all
As a
time.
career, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, good. Terrific.